The alarm buzzed softly at 6:30 a.m., but I had been awake for hours. My heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. Daniel, my husband of 70 years, was on one of his frequent business trips. For months, I had suspected, and then confirmed, that these trips were anything but business, and today I was going to find out the truth, finally, once and for all. Claire, my best friend and co-conspirator, sat beside me at the small kitchen table, sipping her coffee with a knowing smirk. "You're really doing this," she said, voice a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "I have to," I replied, my hands trembling slightly as I loaded the final items into my bag. "If I don't, nothing will ever change. He thinks he can lie, cheat, and manipulate his way through life, and I'll just sit here. No, not anymore." We had spent weeks planning this. Emails, screenshots, bank statements, hotel receipts, and notes documenting every suspicious conversation. Melissa, one of the women involved, had provided more proof than I could have imagined, and now everything was meticulously organized in a folder I clutched tightly in my hands. By 8:00 a.m., Claire dropped me off at the airport. My flight was short, just enough to arrive at the city where Daniel's hotel was located. My palms sweated as I navigated the airport, but every step I took was purposeful. When I arrived, I took a taxi directly to the hotel he was staying at, careful to avoid the reception desk noticing anything unusual. I checked into a room under a false name, leaving my real ID with a friend in case of emergency. The thrill of the secret filled me with adrenaline. Once inside, I carefully unpacked my equipment. A small camera hidden in the corner of the room would capture anyone who entered Daniel's hotel room. Nothing illegal, just documentation. The laptop was ready, my folder of evidence beside me, and the recorder discreetly tucked into my bag. I waited. Hours passed. Every time the elevator chimed, my pulse spiked. And then at 9 p.m. he returned, not alone. A woman I had never seen before clung to his arm. They laughed, whispered, kissed briefly in the hallway. My stomach churned, but I didn't move. This was what I had prepared for, and I would not let my emotions betray me. Claire had instructed me, watch, record, collect evidence. Don't confront him yet. Let him make mistakes on his own. Every move he makes is another piece of proof. I did exactly that. The entire interaction was captured. Elevator logs, hallway cameras, my own hidden recorder. Everything. Once they entered the room, I knew I had enough for the first phase. I didn't need to confront him tonight. The evidence would speak louder than any emotional outburst. The next morning, I called Melissa. She arrived with a quiet urgency, holding her phone. Her eyes were serious, the kind of seriousness that comes from knowing too much. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Melissa nodded. "I've been ready since the beginning. I just didn't have someone like you to organize everything. Now we can make him accountable." Together, we compiled everything into an anonymous whistleblower package. HR, the CEO, and legal would all receive the information simultaneously. Every hotel receipt, email, message, and transaction was cataloged. The web of lies Daniel had spun for years was about to be exposed. By late afternoon, I returned to my hotel room across the hall from his. I set up a small camera in the hallway, nothing illegal, just to catch anyone entering or leaving. Every move he made would now be on record, documented, undeniable. That evening, I watched through the camera as Daniel returned with another woman. His laughter, his casual whispers, his charade of professionalism, all of it captured. I felt the sting of betrayal, but it was tempered by focus. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about justice. The folder of evidence sat beside me, a quiet promise of the storm to come, and I knew at that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after my hotel surveillance, Daniel woke up completely unaware of the storm gathering around him. He sipped his coffee, scrolling through work emails as if nothing had changed. His carefully constructed world, built on lies and deception, was still intact in his mind. but in reality it was crumbling. By mid-morning, HR had received the anonymous package. The documents were detailed, precise, and damning. Hotel receipts, credit card transactions, email screenshots, and travel itineraries. Every detail of Daniel's deceit, professional and personal, was documented. Legal had been looped in, and the CEO had received the initial summary. At home, I stayed calm, sipping my coffee while Claire coordinated updates from Melissa and the other women involved. Every message, every confirmation added weight to the impending fallout. Daniel had no idea that his life was about to unravel, and I was determined to let the process take its full course. Meanwhile, Daniel's office environment shifted subtly but noticeably. Colleagues whispered behind closed doors, casting occasional glances his way. Emails requesting clarifications flooded his inbox, some with sharp, professional questions hinting at internal audits. He tried to maintain composure, but even his confident, polished tone cracked under the pressure. By noon, he received a call from his junior partner. "Daniel, the board has been briefed. HR has requested a full compliance review. Legal is reviewing everything. This is serious." The partner said, voice steady but firm. I don't understand," Daniel stammered, panic creeping into his voice. "It doesn't matter if you understand. The facts are documented. The evidence is undeniable," the partner replied. For the first time, Daniel realized he couldn't control the narrative. Each call, each meeting, each inquiry chipped away at the facade he had maintained for years. And at home, I observed silently, knowing that my meticulous planning was unfolding perfectly. Later that evening, Daniel returned home pale and exhausted. He avoided eye contact, his usual arrogance replaced by quiet dread. I made a simple cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, watching him pace. "You're quiet," he muttered, almost reluctantly, "just reflecting." I said calmly, folding my hands. "Do you know why HR is suddenly so interested in your business trips?" His face paled further. I don't know. Maybe it's nothing. Nothing that involves multiple women, falsified travel claims, and misused company funds. I asked, voice low but controlled. He froze. His palms were clammy, his usual confidence evaporated. I could feel the tension radiating from him. Every lie he had built his life upon was starting to collapse. The next few days were a nightmare for Daniel. HR scheduled interviews. Melissa and the other women were prepared to give detailed accounts. Legal compiled timelines and evidence. Every attempt by Daniel to explain, to deflect, or to threaten failed. Every call he made was countered by documented proof of his lies. At home, he moved like a shadow, silent and withdrawn. I kept a detailed log of his actions, noting panic, despair, and helplessness. My satisfaction wasn't from cruelty. It was from watching justice unfold. The man who had believed himself untouchable was now entirely exposed. By the end of the week, Daniel received an official notice of suspension pending a full investigation. His professional life, meticulously crafted over years, had collapsed in a matter of days. Colleagues no longer spoke freely with him. Clients questioned past transactions. Partners reevaluated their trust. And through it all, I remained composed. The spark of revenge had ignited, and it burned steadily, consuming the lies and deceit Daniel had carefully nurtured. At home, he slumped into a chair, silent and defeated. I felt the quiet satisfaction of months of careful planning reaching its first climax. But this was only the beginning. The deeper consequences were still unfolding, and Daniel's personal downfall had only just started. Days turned into a blur for Daniel. Each morning he awoke, the weight of his lies pressed heavier upon his chest. He tried to maintain a facade of control, but each email, each inquiry from HR, each whispered conversation among colleagues chipped away at it. He had built a life on deception, yet it was now crumbling faster than he could comprehend. I watched from home, quietly cataloging every response, every reaction. Claire coordinated updates from Melissa and the other women, ensuring that each detail corroborated the timeline I had carefully constructed. Every lie, every excuse, every manipulation was now traceable and undeniable. Daniel's panic became more visible with each passing day. Calls to his partners were met with cold, formal responses. Attempts to explain, threaten, or spin narratives collapsed under the sheer weight of evidence. The realization began to dawn on him. He was utterly powerless. One evening, he came home unusually early, avoiding eye contact entirely. His usual swagger, that arrogance I had once loved and despised in equal measure, was gone. He slumped into the chair opposite me, exhausted, broken, and visibly shaken. "You need to understand," I said, calm and deliberate. "This isn't just about professional misconduct. It's about every lie you've told, every betrayal, every moment you manipulated someone for your convenience, and it all comes with consequences." He swallowed hard, eyes darting, searching for a way out. I didn't think, His words trailed off, swallowed by the enormity of the situation. "Exactly," I interrupted. "You didn't think, and now you're paying for it. Every woman you deceived, every client misled, every colleague betrayed. They all know, and you will answer for it." The days that followed were a nightmare for Daniel. HR interviews progressed. Melissa and others provided detailed accounts. The board reviewed evidence meticulously. Every call he made to clients, partners, or colleagues was documented. His professional empire, painstakingly built over years, was collapsing. At home, his attempts at normal conversation became futile. I observed, noting every flinch, every hesitant movement, every sign of panic. His confidence was gone. Every carefully crafted excuse had been dismantled. I spent my days reclaiming my own life amidst the chaos, painting, writing, jogging in the mornings, small acts of self-restoration that filled me with strength. Each step reminded me that Daniel's collapse was not just revenge, it was liberation. Late one night, he approached me, voice trembling. I can fix this somehow," he whispered. I looked at him steadily. "No, Daniel, you cannot fix this. You created a life of lies, manipulation, and deceit, and now the consequences are yours to bear. You are fully exposed, and no one will excuse or overlook what you've done." Tears welled in his eyes, a rare human vulnerability I had rarely witnessed. I felt neither triumph nor cruelty. Instead, I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction that justice was finally unfolding. The following week brought more formal consequences. Official documentation of his misconduct reached clients and partners. Legal teams reviewed every transaction, every communication. Daniel's career, once untouchable, was effectively over. And still he remained at home, silent, withdrawn, a shadow of the man he had once been. I continued to rebuild my life simultaneously. Each act of self-care, each moment of reflection reinforced the truth. The spark of revenge had ignited into a blaze, and Daniel was fully engulfed. Evening after evening, I watched him unravel. Each attempt to regain control was futile. Each call, each meeting, each text sent was countered by evidence. His world was crumbling, and there was no way to stop it. Finally, the inevitable confrontation came. Daniel approached me one night, voice barely audible. "I'm sorry," he said, almost whispering. I shook my head calmly. "Sorry isn't enough, Daniel. Words cannot undo what you've done. You have lost control. You are powerless, and this, finally, is the reality you built." He sank into a chair, defeated, silence filling the space where arrogance and manipulation had once lived. I felt a sense of closure beginning to form, but the story wasn't over. The professional consequences were just one aspect. The personal reckoning, the emotional justice, the full measure of accountability. These were still unfolding. The following morning, Daniel barely rose from bed. The shadow of his failures hung over him like a dense fog. His once polished routine, shower, suit, coffee, emails, had devolved into a series of mechanical motions, each performed with increasing hesitation. At home, I watched quietly from the kitchen as he stared at his phone, scrolling aimlessly, eyes wide and hollow. Each notification, each message seemed to fuel his panic. The emails from HR, colleagues, and even clients accumulated relentlessly. Every attempt he made to explain or justify himself only deepened his humiliation. Melissa and the other women continued to provide statements and confirm timelines. Each piece of evidence reinforced the one before, building an unstoppable case. Daniel's panic was no longer private. It was visible, almost tangible. By afternoon, he attempted to make a call to a key client, hoping to regain some semblance of control. His voice, once confident, was now shaky and unsure. The client, aware of the ongoing investigation, responded politely but firmly. There was no leeway, no forgiveness, only consequences. At home, I finally approached him directly. "You need to face it, Daniel," I said calmly. "Every lie, every betrayal, every stolen night, it's all coming to light. You can't spin, manipulate, or charm your way out of this, not anymore." He swallowed hard, visibly shaking. I didn't think, you didn't think, and now you're paying the price." I interrupted. "This isn't just professional, it's personal. Every action has consequences, and you're about to see the full measure." For the next few days, Daniel's attempts to regain control collapsed spectacularly. Each phone call, each email, each meeting was documented, cataloged, and countered. Melissa, Claire, and the other witnesses ensured that nothing could be disputed. Every piece of evidence was airtight. At home, he avoided my gaze entirely. The arrogance, the entitlement, the false confidence, all gone. He moved through the house silently, consumed by shame, fear, and disbelief. One evening, he attempted another conversation. I can fix this. I can explain everything," he said, voice barely audible. "You can't," I said calmly, folding my hands. "The truth is already out. The evidence is undeniable. You've lost control of your life, your career, your relationships, and now you must live with it." The next morning, the formal HR investigation concluded that Daniel's actions had caused irreparable damage. His suspension was extended indefinitely. Legal reviews confirmed misuse of funds, and all professional associations began severing ties. Clients canceled contracts, colleagues distanced themselves, partners questioned past collaborations. At home, Daniel slumped into a chair, silent, defeated. I poured myself a glass of wine, watching him, realizing the full extent of his unraveling. The personal humiliation was now complete. Every lie exposed, every betrayal documented, every manipulation undone. Yet the final act of my revenge had not yet been delivered. The professional consequences were severe, but the personal reckoning, the ultimate emotional justice, was still to come. I spent the evening meticulously organizing the final elements. Documents, messages, recordings, all pieces of the puzzle that would complete Daniel's downfall. This was the stage for the final confrontation, the moment where every deception would be exposed, and he would have no choice but to face the reality he had created. The anticipation filled the house with tension. Daniel, for the first time in years, had no plan, no strategy, no defenses. He was exposed, vulnerable, and utterly powerless. I looked at him across the room, calm, collected, and certain. The storm I had built was about to reach its climax, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting faint stripes across the living room floor. Daniel sat slumped on the couch, silent, defeated. The weight of the past week's events had finally broken him. Emails, calls, and HR notices had arrived one after another, each more damning than the last. The careful image he had constructed over years lay in ruins. I entered the room calmly, carrying the final folder of compiled evidence. Every screenshot, every email, every hotel receipt, every confirmation from Melissa and other witnesses. It was all here. This was the culmination of months of planning, preparation, and controlled patience. "I think it's time you fully understand the consequences of your actions," I said, voice calm but firm. He looked up at me, eyes wide with panic, trembling slightly. "Please, don't," he whispered, voice cracking. "I already did," I said softly, opening the folder and spreading the documents across the coffee table. Each piece was meticulously organized, leaving no room for excuses or explanations. Daniel's hands trembled as he reached for a page, only to withdraw them, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the evidence. Every deceit, every betrayal, every lie was laid bare. "This is everything," I continued, voice steady. "All your trips, all the lies, all the women, all the financial manipulations, everything documented, and it's going to HR, legal, the board, everyone who needs to see it. There's nowhere to hide now." He swallowed hard, his breathing uneven. I didn't mean intentions don't matter," I said firmly. "Actions do, and you acted recklessly, selfishly, and deceitfully. Now you face the reality you created." For the next hour, I calmly walked him through the consequences. HR had already begun the process of permanent termination. Legal teams were reviewing potential repercussions for misused funds and contractual breaches. Clients had been notified. Partners were reconsidering any association. Every step Daniel had taken to protect himself was futile. His professional world, once untouchable, was completely dismantled. The shock on his face was visible, pride replaced by fear, arrogance replaced by shame, and control replaced by helplessness. At home, he no longer spoke freely. He moved silently through the rooms, avoiding eye contact, avoiding meals, avoiding any sense of normalcy. Each day, the weight of humiliation deepened. And I, watching quietly, felt the culmination of years of betrayal and months of preparation finally manifest as justice. One evening, he approached me, voice barely audible. I can make amends," he whispered, desperate. "No," I said calmly. "There is no amends for the damage you've done. You can't undo the lies, the betrayals, or the pain. The only thing left is for you to face the consequences and reflect." And in that moment, I realized the revenge had completed its arc. Daniel had been stripped of every defense, every privilege, every illusion of control. He was exposed, accountable, and powerless, a mirror of the suffering he had inflicted. Meanwhile, I began to reclaim my life fully. Painting, writing, reconnecting with friends, and traveling for the sheer joy of independence filled my days. Melissa and other women reached out periodically, sharing their own sense of closure, and together we acknowledged the victory, not just over Daniel, but over the betrayal, the manipulation, and the lies. The final weeks were quiet. Daniel's attempts at conversation were minimal, all pitiful and ineffective. He had no audience, no allies, no power. His professional world was in ruins, his personal life stripped bare. The satisfaction I felt was not derived from cruelty. It was derived from justice, from reclaiming my dignity, from watching the man who had tried to dominate me finally rendered powerless by his own actions. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I gathered Melissa, Claire, and a few others who had been part of this journey. Glasses in hand, we toasted quietly, not to revenge, but to survival, empowerment, and truth. "To freedom," Melissa said softly. "To reclaiming what's ours," I added, voice steady and resolute. And in that moment, I felt complete. The spark of revenge had ignited fully, burned brightly, and finally illuminated the path to liberation. Daniel's empire of lies lay in ruins. My life, once constrained by betrayal, was now mine again. Justice had been served, not through anger, but through meticulous planning, patience, and courage. The story of deceit, betrayal, and ultimate revenge had reached its conclusion. I had won, not by hurting unnecessarily, but by exposing the truth, reclaiming control, and restoring my peace. The chapter was closed, with Daniel removed from the equation. Professionally and emotionally, the house felt lighter. The tension that had gripped every room for years had dissipated, replaced by a quiet calm. I spent mornings revisiting hobbies I had neglected, painting, journaling, and jogging through the parks nearby. Each stroke of the brush, each sentence written, Each step on the pavement was a reminder that life could be reclaimed, rebuilt, and reshaped. Melissa reached out periodically. Over cups of coffee and late-night phone calls, we recounted our experiences, shared laughs, and mourned the trust that had been stolen from us. Her presence reminded me that I wasn't alone in this journey. Together, we celebrated our survival and resilience. Even Claire, ever my anchor, expressed a quiet sense of satisfaction. "You planned this meticulously," she said one evening, settling beside me on the porch. "And now it's done completely. He has no control, no power, and no excuses left." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of closure. My revenge had not only punished Daniel for his betrayals, but had also restored me, my confidence, my voice, and my dignity. Every sleepless night spent planning, every painstaking detail collected, every careful step executed perfectly had led to this moment of triumph. By this time, Daniel rarely spoke, rarely moved, and rarely attempted any interaction. His personal world was barren, stripped of the false pretenses he had maintained for years. He had lost friends, colleagues, and any remnants of authority he had wielded. It was not a spectacle of humiliation for me. It was simply justice in motion. I began reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with, traveling to cities I had dreamed of exploring, and laughing freely without reservation. The world, once overshadowed by deceit and anxiety, now felt open, welcoming, and full of possibilities. Evenings were spent quietly, reflecting on the transformation. The storm of betrayal and revenge had passed, leaving behind a landscape of clarity, empowerment, and personal growth. I realized the true power of revenge was not in causing pain, but in reclaiming life and dignity that had been threatened. Melissa and I created a small ritual. We toasted quietly to the victories of truth, the resilience of women, and the reclaiming of our lives. These small celebrations became a symbol of triumph over adversity, a reminder that justice was not just about punishment, but also about empowerment. Claire often reminded me, "You didn't just expose him, you restored yourself." Those words resonated deeply. Every step of the process, every painstaking detail of the revenge, was not only about dismantling Daniel's lies, but about rebuilding the parts of myself he had tried to suppress. The quiet mornings, the laughter with friends, the freedom to pursue passions, all of it was a testament to the completion of my journey. The emotional scars remained, but they were softened by the knowledge that justice had been executed with precision, courage, and dignity. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I sat on the porch with Melissa and Claire. Glasses in hand, we raised a toast to truth, dignity, and freedom. I said, voice steady, "To never letting anyone steal our lives again." Melissa added, "In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. The spark of revenge had grown into a flame, burned brightly, and illuminated the path to liberation." Daniel's chapter was closed. My life had been restored. I smiled, knowing the storm had passed, and that the future, my future, was mine alone to shape, live, and enjoy. Months had passed since Daniel's fall. The house, once tense with lies and deceit, was now calm, almost serene. The air no longer carried the weight of manipulation or betrayal. Instead, it was filled with quiet productivity, laughter, and freedom. I had fully reconnected with myself. Morning runs became a ritual, the sound of my sneakers on pavement a reminder that I had reclaimed control over my life. Journaling and painting filled my evenings, each stroke and sentence a testament to resilience and growth. The hobbies I had abandoned years ago had returned, now imbued with the satisfaction of self-reclamation. Melissa and the other women remained a steady support network. Through them, I learned that sharing stories of betrayal and triumph could be healing. We laughed at the absurdity of Daniel's arrogance, cried quietly for the lost trust, and celebrated our victories together. There was a profound sense of empowerment in solidarity, a reminder that we were not defined by the betrayals we endured, but by how we reclaimed our lives. Daniel's personal collapse was total. Professionally, He had been removed from every position of influence, legally accountable for every misdeed, and socially isolated. He had no allies, no friends willing to defend him, and no path to redemption. His arrogance, once towering, had been replaced with quiet shame and withdrawal. At home, I maintained a careful balance. I no longer needed to confront him directly. The consequences had already spoken louder than any argument or conversation. He existed quietly, a shadow of the man who had once manipulated and deceived, while I flourished in the sunlight of my regained autonomy. One afternoon, I took a long walk with Claire. "It's over," she said, smiling. "Everything. You did it." "Yes," I replied, feeling the weight of months lift from my shoulders. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, and my life. We sat on a park bench, watching children play and couples stroll by, and I realized the full extent of my liberation. The fear, the anger, and the betrayal that had once consumed me were replaced by purpose, clarity, and peace. Daniel's downfall had been thorough, but more importantly, my growth had been complete. Melissa joined us later that evening. We shared a quiet toast, not just to revenge, but to truth, resilience, and freedom. "To never letting anyone steal our lives again," she said softly, "to reclaiming what's ours." I added, voice steady and resolute. As the sun set, casting a warm glow across the horizon, I understood that the story of betrayal and revenge had reached its conclusion. Daniel's lies were exposed, his control dismantled, and his arrogance humbled. And yet, the true victory was mine, the reclamation of my life, my voice, and my peace. The spark of revenge had ignited fully, burned brightly, and finally illuminated the path to liberation. My story, once shadowed by deception and betrayal, was now one of empowerment, justice, and ultimate closure. I stepped into the evening with a deep sense of calm. The storm had passed, the chapter was closed. And the life that awaited me was mine alone to shape, live, and cherish.